Now, the part of the show you've been waiting for, because I know you love it so much, two bald men talking about the excesses of government. Rich Bratten from principlesofliberty.org. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, John.
I tell you, chicks dig this. Chicks dig this.
I've only got one to worry about, and she digs it, so I like it.
I want to talk to you a little bit about this flurry of legislation that comes every year. In the state capitol, there's at least 500, sometimes 700, sometimes 800 bills that have to get looked at, and by law, they all have to be voted on. So the legislature can't leave one, we don't have time. They actually have to make time, which makes for a wonderful end of session when they go, love it, hate it, and that's, it's awful. But lots of groups lobby for and against different bits of legislation. It makes sense because they're either they're going to get killed or they're going to make a lot of money.
Right.
Matter of fact, I was pretty certain. I mean, think of all the big industries that have a huge presence down there. And I was surprised when they took that wrapping off the gold dome that there wasn't actually an Excel power logo up there.
Yeah, probably could have
with a motto that says, why rent when you can own? Yeah, but so the teachers union has a massive force down there, and they look at every bill. They look at every
that affects their issue.
That affects their issue, or their one issue, or their coalition.
Right.
But for taxpayers, for guys like me, we don't know what's going on.
Right.
And your organization steps in and actually looks at bills. Tell me a little bit about Principles of Liberty.
Sure. Principles of Liberty is a nonpartisan group, and what we attempt to do is to drive the conversation about policy towards what's the role of government and how is that role of government being executed down at the state capitol, down in Denver.
So in other words, you're just a bunch of worthless ideologues, is that right?
We are very worthwhile ideologues.
All right, so you actually take a look and analyze bills.
Yes.
So in other words, I wouldn't say you're the people's lobbyist, but you're the lobbyist for free market, limited government principles that we were founded on.
Right.
Would that be a good way to put it?
Yeah, the big difference between our group and any of the other groups that you mentioned before is we don't lobby or even rate bills based on issues. We rate bills based on principles, and there's a difference between, an issues group might be, like you mentioned, the CEA or unions or gun people or baby people or
trial lawyers, or the home builders,
right.
and they want to make sure that their turf is protected,
right.
or that their opponents, their competition is not allowed in the market, or whatever it
Typically
is.
what we call rent seekers, right? They want to use the advantage of, they want to use the force of government to their advantage, either individually or for their industry, right? So those are all issues-based, and even the social issues. You know, they're not necessarily rent seekers in terms of for-profit, but they're focused on their issue. What differentiates us is we're focused on simply on principles. So we have clearly defined principles on what is the role of government, you know, and how do we determine what that role of government is, and then so we define our principles.
Even if it's bad for one particular constituency, one lobbying group, we're saying, all right, if you believe in principles of freedom, if you believe in these liberty issues, here's the right way to look at this one piece of legislation.
Correct. So we'll look at a piece of legislation and we'll say, do any of these principles look like they apply? Oh, here's a bill on something that affects property rights. Okay, does this bill support property rights, or does this bill subvert property rights by using the force of government to dictate what people should do or can't do with their property?
Let's talk a little bit about the principles first.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting when you look at legislators or people, different organizations, you can kind of get a sense of where they line up by how different groups rate the legislature.
Right.
You know, so if the Colorado Union of Taxpayers rates them high, but the Sierra Club and Environment Colorado or some of the left-wing groups rate them low, it gives you a sense of who they are, or the opposite way.
Right.
When it comes to legislation, you do it and you say, you hold it up and say, how does this compare to these principles?
Right.
What are those principles? Let's start there.
Yeah, let's start. And we do training sessions so people can attend our training sessions. You can find out how did we define our principles and what have we gone through to do that, so that other people who leave our training can say, hey, I like that. I mean, they can tweak it their own way. So how do you define your principles? So our principles are individual liberty and personal responsibility. All right, they're property rights, free markets.
So individual liberty and responsibility, meaning that people should be able to direct their own relationships relationships.
Correct.
That they should be able to have free associations with people.
Absolutely.
So does that weigh into things like gay marriage and those issues?
If we're focused on the principle, so the question is, a piece of legislation that comes up, how does it apply those principles to whether it's a social issue or whether it's a business issue or whether it's a property issue?
Does it give individuals more power to live the lives that they want to live? And does it hold those people responsible for their actions if it causes a cost? All right, that's one good principle.
Right.
Give me another one.
Property rights, free markets. And those are two principles, but they're inexorably intertwined together. Free markets are built on the concept of property rights.
So we're really talking about also rule of law here, that you need free markets, which means the government can't say, no, you can't get into the marketplace, as they do with the taxi cab industry.
Correct.
Transportation.
Uber and those issues,
all those
sure.
things where you say, oh, you want to start a business? You can't, because your competition lobbies us so well, you can't do it.
That's right.
And also, to make that work, you need to have private property rights to say,
Absolutely.
These are my taxis, or this is my mountain, and I want to own the mineral rights underneath these. So if you don't have those, you can't have that competition. All right. That makes sense.
And those principles are driven out of what's the role of government, right? The role of government, if you define what that is it's to protect life, liberty, and property, okay? So out of that, and we go through historical documents, but out of those things come our principles, which are based on what we believe the role of government is.
Personal responsibility, individual liberty,
property rights, free markets.
What else?
Limited government, fiscal responsibility. Those are two principles that go hand in hand.
When you say, all right, give me some meat to that. Limited government. Now, because that can be subjective as well.
Yeah.
I look at things like the NSA spying on my phone calls and knowing when I have, and it's like, that's not liberty. That's not limited government.
Correct.
When I see the regulatory state continue to, you can't do this, you can't do that, but if you want to do that, you have to get permission over here.
Right.
All right.
And pay a fee and yada yada. And so, limited government's pretty easy. I mean, is government expanding? All right, or is government, contracting? Or is government doing what it really should be doing, which is protecting life, liberty, or property? Or is government regulating behavior, like, for example, outlawing the use of tanning beds? Or, for example, hey, you can't smoke a cigarette if you're 18, 19, or 20 years old. Is that the role of government? All right, so that's limited or expansion government.
Let me throw a couple bills or potential bills your way, and tell me how you analyze this. One of the bills going this year is a bill that would allow bar owners to keep their joints open, not until 2 o'clock, but much later if they want.
Right.
Not that they have to, but this way, if I own a bar or a restaurant, if I want to stay open, I can stay open.
Right.
So you take a look at this bill as the group, and you write what kind of analysis.
Right.
Let's use that as an example.
Sure, we would take a look at that, and that one's complicated because what it's doing is it's trying to drive it down to the local level decision making, give people there, and there's been a lot of amendments. But let's talk about the overarching concept. Right. Should a bar opener be able to hold their bar open and shut it whenever they choose? And we would say, yeah, the property rights dictate that person should be able to utilize his property for free market purposes, as long as he's not violating the rights of others in any manner in which he chooses.
Pretty open and close.
Pretty easy.
All right, give me. Is this a partisan gig?
No.
Now, because I hear this,
right,
and in my ears I'm thinking, oh, this sounds like what the Republicans say they are. And so as Republicans, they would be thinking, hey, look what these guys said about my bill.
You would think.
So Republicans must love you.
Oh, no. Not yes and no. Some do, some really agree with us, and we have some really good, particularly new legislators on the House side. We have some really good legislators on the Senate side. However, there are quite a number of Republicans who don't particularly care for what we do. Because, interestingly, our principles, you can find those principles in the Republican Party platform, in the Libertarian Party platform, and in the Democratic Party platform. I've got color-coded copies of all of those platforms highlighting where our principles show up.
I've never found a candidate who's running for office that wasn't a small government kind of guy.
Right.
I never found one that wanted more regulation. I never found one that wanted to expand the role of government into our lives and into our bedrooms. I've never found that, but yet give me a couple examples of something that maybe you've done an analysis and Republicans don't like it.
Probably the biggest thing is a lot of times you get on both sides of the aisle, they want to go down, they want to create jobs. There's this myth that government can create jobs, all right? That's not the role of government, to create jobs. But, so what they want to do...
Nor can government create jobs.
Correct.
Government can only stop an industry from creating a job by taking their money and try to reallocate it to someplace less effective.
Correct. Government can't do anything that it hasn't first taken from the people first, right? So, so perfect example, House Bill 1001 last year, and then it's spawned more legislation this year, which has basically turned Colorado citizens, all right, into venture capitalists against our will, because the state is going to give grants to industries just because they happen to be advanced, you know, whatever advanced means. It's a very broad definition, and the state will throw money at them in the hopes that their business will flourish and life will be great and will have created jobs.
This is what we know as corporate welfare.
Correct.
It's cronyism.
Correct.
You have it in.
And it's bipartisan for sure. Yes.
And it is bipartisan.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you ever find yourself putting out an analysis of a bill, and you've got a Democrat going, hey, Republicans, these guys like it?
Yeah, last year, and I can't remember the specific bill, but last year we knew that we were really gaining traction in the legislature in terms of being on the radar for how should we talk about policy when Democrats started referencing the POL ratings on a bill at the well, Principles of Liberty ratings at the well, which is when they're in debate on the floor in the House or the Senate. In the House, we were mentioned a couple times at the well by Democrats because, you know, we happen to support their bill because we are nonpartisan. You know, for example, last year, the mandatory testing of DNA. There were 2 people down there to testify against that bill, all right? One was the ACLU, okay, and one was me. That was it. Okay, so, you know, that gives you a little bit of a flavor because, again, we're not issues-based, we're principles-based. We're driven by our principles. Now, sometimes you get bills that are conflicting, right? You have conflicting principles. There's a property rights issue and there's a limited government issue, and so if that happens, then we won't rate that bill.
We want to lower taxes, which you like, but we want to only do it for this one industry that at the cost of other rights.
And yeah, I'm actually rating some bills right along those. Another bipartisan bill right now that I'm going to catch a lot of feedback on.
Is it just you? Is it just this is a nice way to have, hey, I'm Rick Bratten, I think there's a bad bill, and off it goes?
Yes, King Richard has spoken. No, we have a group of volunteers, and we have some exceptional volunteers who do a great job, and so it's coordinated around the state, and that's why we do our training sessions around the state.
To get more people involved.
To get more people involved. Okay. Either with us or on their own, doing their own thing.
This is the part, and here's a punchline, I guess. This stuff is not held close to you just between you and the legislators. This is something for everybody to look at. You might not agree with, but this is a way to know what bills are going on and how those bills really do.
Right.
Where do people get your analysis? Because this is a great time of year to actually see what these bills really do.
Right. And you can go online to our website, which is principlesofliberty.org. So it's all one word, principlesofliberty.org. And you can go online, and each week you can sign up for our email list if you want to. We'll give you that week's report. A lot of legislators are signed up on that report. So you can see every week's report, and you can see every bill rating.
Principlesofliberty.org. Rich, thank you. And hey, thank you. Check out the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. And please tell a friend. We'll see you next week.